rejects help from the Arnott's extortionist. Native title wrangle has Queensland Premier urging High Court reforms, and the fortune lavished on the home of the former Coles-Myer boss.
From National 9 News, this is Nightline with Jim Waley.
Good evening. With an extortionist costing the Arnott's Biscuit Company nearly $1 million a day, help has now come from an unexpected source. The man who was meant to benefit from the extortionist's demands says he wants nothing to do with it and has appealed for the threats to end.
From the first threats against Arnott's, convicted double murderer Ronald Thomas has appeared to hold the key. Today he spoke through his solicitor to deny any involvement.
I want everyone to know that I have had no part in these threats. I don't know who made the threats, and I have never asked anyone to make them.
Thomas has always denied the murders of Maureen Ambrose and Peter Wade on the Gold Coast 6 years ago. The extortionist is threatening to poison Arnott's biscuits unless the police who charged Thomas undergo lie detector tests. Thomas, a self-described battler, says he feels for those Arnott staff who've been stood down.
I don't want a whole lot of people who are already doing it tough being put off work because of me. I have done it tough myself, and I know what it feels like.
Thomas, who's seeking a High Court review of his convictions, says the extortionist is not helping.
If you want to help me, you will drop the whole thing and write to the newspapers telling them it's off. I know you are trying to help me, but this is not the way.
If that appeal has no effect, Plan B is now in action, an official $100,000 award for information leading to an arrest.
As you can see, these familiar red trucks are waiting to bring you your Arnott's biscuits once again.
Arnott's is now planning American-style tamper-proof packaging to protect its product, although it could boost the price of a packet of biscuits by 50 cents and still offer no guarantees.
It's like trying to develop an escape-proof prison. It's highly unlikely that they would ever achieve that at a reasonable cost.
Hugh Riminton for Nightline.
Until now, it's been the High Court's decision in the Wick case which has been the centre of controversy. Today, it was the High Court itself which came under fire. Queensland Premier Rob Borbidge claims the court is threatening the power of our parliaments and has called for restraints on the leading judges in the land. Laurie Wilson has our report.
In the wake of the Wick decision, Queensland Premier Rob Borbidge has described the actions of the High Court as both disturbing and dangerous.
The High Court has assumed for itself the role of lawmaker, and I think that is a massive threat to the democratic institutions of this country.
Mr Borbidge says it's time for the court's powers to be overhauled. He wants judges to be approved by referendum and appointed for a fixed term, and says there should be a court of constitutional appeal to provide a check on the High Court.
It is a fairy tale to suggest that unelected judges who seek actively and radically to remake the law should have nothing restricting them other than their own self-proclaimed sense of decency.
The High Court isn't the only institution under attack. The battle over the Civil Aviation Safety Authority shows no sign of letting up, with renewed calls for the board to resign. The Association of Aircraft Engineers says air safety in Australia is now being threatened by the controversy, and in a letter to Transport Minister John Sharp, it says the board should go.
We believe that the situation is becoming critical. Something needs to happen.
But the association does not support the appointment of former CAA Chairman Dick Smith, who says he wants to take over the Air Safety Authority.
We would have some concerns with Dick Smith, particularly as chairman of the board.
Laurie Wilson reporting for Nightline.
Sydney police believe a man who stabbed a woman up to 20 times may be linked to a series of assaults in the city's southwest. It's believed 28-year-old Debbie Donoghue was attacked when she disturbed an intruder in her Belmore home. Her father arrived at the house to be told his daughter was in a serious condition. Delivery drivers for Coca-Cola are threatening industrial action after one of their colleagues was shot 5 times in Sydney's west yesterday. Craig Pereza was attacked when making a delivery to the Warrington TAFE campus for the first time since being bashed there 16 months ago. The incident was witnessed by his wife and son, who he'd asked to come along to make him feel more secure. Mr. Pereza remains in serious condition. Police are still searching for the gunman. A man has faced court over yesterday's shootout in a Gold Coast shopping centre. 24-year-old James Larkham of Sydney is charged with being one of two gunmen who held up a convenience store, starting a chase in which more shots were fired. Police questioned another man this afternoon. Melbourne Supreme Court heard claims today that money seemed no object during the multi-million-dollar renovations carried out at the home of former Coles Myer chief Brian Quinn. Details of the lavish work were revealed as the prosecution alleged they were the product of greed.
Bob Lockhart spent 6 years supervising the renovations at Brian Quinn's Templestowe home. He said his first job was to cut down 10 huge pine trees to make way for a tennis court. He then built a tennis pavilion the size of a small house. It had marble floors and verandas. 2 planter boxes were built for Mrs. Trina Quinn at a cost of $8,000. Mr. Lockhart said the arch bridge over the swimming pool was constructed for a wedding reception for the Quinn's daughter. The house entry walls were lined with silk wallpaper. The carpet was made overseas and the mirrors were decorated with gold veins. The prosecution says Quinn conspired to defraud Coles Myer, writing off the costs against other company property. Mr. Lockhart said while Mr. and Mrs. Quinn issued the instructions, he believed the house was owned by Coles Myer. The order from Coles was just to do the work and charge it. It wasn't costed, it wasn't quoted. During the first 2 years, Mr. Lockhart said he refurbished all the rooms at the front of the house. Over the next few years, he then demolished all that work to make way for a first-storey extension. The only thing saved were the cupboards in the master bedroom. The trial is continuing. Jane Hodgkinson for Nightline.
Another scorcher is expected to cause problems in Adelaide tomorrow after temperatures topped 40 degrees today. An early morning power cut led to chaos on city streets. Elective surgery had to be postponed while shops were left in the dark for up to 4 hours. There were 3 fires in the Adelaide Hills. At least one started in suspicious circumstances. Victorian Premier Jeff Kennett, seemingly always on the prowl for sporting events, has confirmed he wants to snare the inaugural Super League Grand Final for Melbourne. He believes the capacity of the MCG could clinch the big game ahead of Sydney or Brisbane.
Premier Kennett might have been hanging around with some big tough blokes from Japan today, promoting Melbourne as host of one of 4 grand sumo tournaments to be held in Australia, but he was also pushing for Melbourne as the venue for the Super League Grand Final. It was pencilled in for either Sydney or Brisbane on the 20th of September, before Super League invited Victoria to put in a bid.
Mr Carr is doing everything he can to secure it for New South Wales. The only thing he can't provide is a venue that will actually accommodate as many people as are accommodated at the MCG.
If I had the unemployment that Victoria's got, I'd be making a bid for everything in sight.
The date could prove a problem for Victoria, though, with September the 20th set down for the AFL preliminary final. Sydney was showing off its crowning sporting glory today, or at least a computerised version of Olympic Park, venue for the 2000 Games. Cutting through Homebush, the massive Olympic Boulevard, the enormous stadium dominates the skyline above a giant public plaza for 300,000 people.
The Sydney Olympic Plaza is an area 4 times the size of the deck of the Sydney Harbour Bridge.
Among the Olympic-sized infrastructure, a 200-metre steel canopy covering the central railway station, which must cope with 50,000 passengers every hour. Ramon Dale for Nightline.
After the break, the new vaccination for whooping cough. Scientists say it's safer. And new evidence about the asteroid thought to have wiped out the dinosaurs. Charges are expected to be laid tomorrow against a man following the assault on Melbourne footy show star Sam Newman. He suffered a broken nose when attacked at his home 2 nights ago after a man rammed a van through the front gate. Newman made a statement to police today about the incident. 44-year-old Michael Hamill has told a Melbourne newspaper he was the person involved. The woman at the house during the altercation has been identified as manicurist Melissa Skirton. A South African magistrate is expected to announce tomorrow whether alleged pedophile Philip Bell should be extradited to Australia. A hearing was told this evening that New South Wales authorities believe there's enough evidence to warrant prosecution against Bell on 215 charges. The head of the New South Wales Department of Education, Ken Boston, has admitted to the Wood Royal Commission that the system failed to always protect students from sex offenders. It follows allegations that some teachers who were known pedophiles were never investigated or reprimanded by his department. The Commission was told there were 400 teachers on file over past and present allegations of sexual misconduct with students. New South Wales teachers are to undergo a course on sexual conduct. Fear of side effects has been the major factor for many parents refusing to have their children vaccinated. Now, medical researchers say a new, safer whooping cough vaccine is available in Australia and should ease some of the worries.
Like the existing triple antigen injection, the new vaccine protects children against 3 diseases: tetanus, diphtheria and whooping cough. What sets it apart from the older vaccine is its highly purified whooping cough component, which means less chance of temporary reactions like swelling and fever.
I think this new vaccine will help in the fight against whooping cough, because it'll be more acceptable to parents who know that it will produce fewer side effects in their children.
Fuelled by an all-time low immunisation rate, whooping cough figures last year surged to 4,000 cases across the country.
Already this year there have been 3 deaths amongst babies under the age of 12 months in New South Wales.
In preventing whooping cough, a trial on 22,000 children found the new vaccine highly effective. The New England Journal of Medicine describing it as a milestone in the search for improved vaccines. Doctors are urging the government to make the new vaccine free of charge like the triple antigen. Currently, Infinrix costs around $35 a shot. Federal Cabinet, meanwhile, was finalising its new immunisation strategy today. Expected to be launched within a few weeks, it could contain incentives for parents, including cash payments and free shots on national immunisation days. Sheryl Taylor for Nightline.
The long march of Deng Xiaoping appears to be nearing its end. Chinese party of chiefs are gathering in Beijing amid fresh reports that their longtime leader has suffered a severe stroke and is near death.
Frail and unsteady, this is the last time Deng Xiaoping was seen in public 3 years ago in Shanghai. Even then, his health was in serious decline. Now, aged 92, the man who transformed China from a closed Stalinist state into an economic powerhouse is reported to be critically ill. The Chinese president, Jiang Zemin, is said to have rushed back to Beijing from a tour of an interior province, a clear sign of serious concern for the health of the aging leader. Jiang Zemin has long held the formal positions of power in China, but such is the influence of Deng that mere rumours of his deteriorating health send the stock market plunging in neighbouring Hong Kong. Under Deng, the Chinese economy has become one of the fastest growing in the world, but political change hasn't followed. And 8 years after the protests in Tiananmen Square, the pro-democracy movement has been crushed, with most dissidents either in jail or in exile. With crime and corruption rampant, the authorities are desperate to keep the lid on any renewed unrest.
The Chinese leadership has had years to prepare for the death of Deng Xiaoping. In effect, the succession has already taken place. But their overwhelming concern will be to prevent any instability that threatens the authority of the Communist Party.
Australian anti-gun campaigners have joined families of the Dunblane massacre victims in pressing for tougher firearms laws in the UK. The Dunblane parents are still fighting for a total ban on handguns. The Australians presented a message to the bereaved parents of Dunblane from Walter Mikac, whose wife and 2 children were killed at Port Arthur. Members of the Australian contingent plan to sit in on a British parliamentary debate on new gun laws. Tensions between North and South Korea have eased a fraction, the North Koreans now hinting they might accept the defection of top-ranking official Hwang Young-yop. North Korean security agents who have menacingly patrolled outside South Korea's embassy in Beijing, where Hwang is hiding, have been withdrawn. And the US and South Korea are planning to resume food aid to the North, which has been on the verge of famine. Australia has played a part in a major exploration project that's uncovered the most powerful proof yet that the dinosaurs were wiped out by a giant asteroid. The scientists say dirt recovered from the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean is like a flight data recorder, revealing details of the world's worst disaster that we know of.
Australia is one of 20 countries funding the project off the coast of Florida. Scientists drilled out rock and dirt samples from the bottom of the ocean. In them, they discovered remnants of a massive asteroid, which they say hit Mexico 65 million years ago, wiping out the dinosaurs and virtually everything else on Earth. According to the Australian project director, it was the most significant natural disaster in history.
Represents probably the most cataclysmic event that has caused environmental and thus evolutionary change on Earth over the last few hundred million years.
Scientists now believe the asteroid was so devastating it created enough dust to block the sun, leaving the Earth in a deep freeze. That was what killed the dinosaurs and up to 70% of all plant life. In the United States, Nick McCallum for Nightline.
In a moment, the battle for Australia's skies. Paul Lynham talks with Dick Smith. While Transport Minister John Sharp continues his bid to force the resignation of the Civil Aviation Safety Board, Dick Smith is campaigning to be the new chairman. But Mr Smith is a controversial figure in the aviation industry, and Labor's Kim Beazley says it may be better to appoint someone with a fresh viewpoint. Putting his viewpoint from Sydney, Dick Smith is speaking with Paul Lynham in Canberra.
Dick Smith, welcome to Nightline.
Thank you.
Why are you the best person to be the chairman of the Civil Aviation Safety Authority?
Well, I don't know if I'm the best person, but I've got the skills to do it. I've had some experience there before, so I can learn from some mistakes, of course, and also my whole life is aviation. And also I've got no commercial interest in aviation. I'm purely a person who's interested in doing something worthwhile for my country to give myself some satisfaction.
And is your strong support for the Liberal Party a help or a hindrance?
Well, I don't really have strong support for the Liberal Party. I certainly supported a change of government after 13 years because I thought the Labor government had completely lost the plot, especially in relation to aviation. But as I've said to this present government, if they don't make the changes which I think are necessary for Australia, I'll be supporting a change again at the next election.
But you see, Labor's Lindsay Tanner says that John Sharp's secret agenda is repaying to you political debts.
Yeah, it's absolute rubbish. I mean, Labor put me in as the chairman before. They weren't repaying any debts. And also, if you're going to repay a political debt, surely I'd deserve, say, ambassador for Washington or the Holy See or something like that, not the chairman of the CASA. It's the worst job in Australia. No, probably the Minister for Prisons would be worse.
Well, given that it isn't exactly the top job, why on earth do you want it? It can hardly be the money or the fun.
No, it's just satisfaction. I believe that I didn't finish a job. When I left, they sacked my people, and within months, the whole place had gone back to as it was, this terrible, unaccountable bureaucracy. I consider that I failed. I want the chance of completing the job properly.
Why did you take the unusual step today of virtually seeking Kim Beazley's endorsement for your candidacy?
No, I didn't do that, but I just wanted to say to the Labor Party especially that if I was offered the job and then they continued to attack me on sort of some party political ideological way, that I wouldn't take the job because I would be ineffective.
Well, how do you respond to Mr Beazley's suggestion that given your earlier roles with the old Civil Aviation Authority that, quote, it may be that a fresh viewpoint would be valuable?
Yes, I think that's a reasonable point, except they should nominate someone who's got a fresh viewpoint but can be tough and make the decisions that are necessary. They haven't done that as yet.
Well, you left the CAA back in February, 92, wasn't it?
That's right.
With a lot of enemies.
No, I didn't leave with a lot of enemies.
But you picked them up later, did you?
Yes, later, because within a year and a half that the people I'd put in disappeared. The 2 years I was there, I had a very good time. I had the unions on side. We made some really good changes. I think we were going in the right direction. The mistake I made was to leave after 2 years, not to stay on.
And what about affordable safety? You copped heaps for that phrase, didn't you?
Yes, I copped heaps for... It's the most important thing I've ever said. I told the truth to the Australian public, and that is that the regulator has totally different levels of safety for different-sized aircraft. Even now, the government has said we're going to put that safety rating on air tickets. It's something that should have been done years ago. The Seaview crash probably wouldn't have occurred if those people had known that if they'd gone on the larger Qantas plane from Sydney, it was very unlikely to crash because it's a full airline safety standard.
Another criticism, Dick Smith is a risk-taker, an adventurer. Is this the sort of bloke we want running an air safety organisation?
Yes, well, all I can say about that is I'm a risk manager, that all of my so-called adventures have been without any problems at all because I've had a tremendous amount of expertise at managing risk and reducing it, and that's what you need at the top of the CASA. You need someone who's going to say, we have $70 million to spend, how can we do it effectively? At the present time, that organisation is almost totally useless in providing a safety net it basically just doesn't work effectively.
Well, you were there at the top for a couple of years. You did turn the place virtually upside down. You got rid of thousands of people, put the broom through it. If it was in such great shape, how come we had Monarch and Seaview so soon after you left?
Well, it wasn't so soon. It was a number of years later, and it was quite simple that the people who were in charge of grounding these aeroplanes didn't do it. And that was because immediately after I left, instead of putting in some aviation expertise to run the organisation, they made sure that people who were running it knew nothing about aviation safety and knew nothing about the aviation industry. And of course, what happens then, the people down the road who are supposed to be making the tough decisions don't make them because they don't have the support from the top.
You said back in '94, I would like to finish what I started one way or another. I will.
Well, maybe that's right, and I mightn't do it this time. I have a feeling that there's going to be a tremendous amount of political pressure for Dick Smith not to go back there. But Justice Fisher, he's 72, I'm only 52, so I've got 20 years. I can do another 5 or 10 years of flying with my books and publications and so forth, and maybe when I'm 60, look at the job again.
Dick Smith, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Jim, back to you.
Thank you, Paul. Still to come on Nightline, the finance and weather, and in sport, a legal battle over the AFL draft, France's daredevil skiers, and the Australians on target in South Africa. Now to sport, and the Australians continue to look sharp in the early stages of their tour of South Africa. After some big hitting from our batsmen, the bowlers came to the fore against Western Province. Andy Bickle and Michael Bevan leading Australia to a 32-run victory.
The South African provincial champions needed more than 350 runs to win the match, but that target and Bickle's bowling proved two big obstacles. Bickle ripped through the middle order, and with some help from Michael Bevan, who took 3 wickets, the Aussies looked unstoppable. In the end, Western Province tried to hang on for a draw, but the locals were all out with almost 3 overs to spare. England continues to find its feet in the Test arena, although Caddick's got a little in the way against New Zealand.
Tough one for the umpire to give, obviously.
18-year-old Denny Vittori was the unlucky bowler, but he still sent a shiver through the tourists on the final day. Chasing 307, captain Mike Atherton made 118, England winning by 4 wickets and clinching the series. And officials remain confident the English team will take part in next year's Commonwealth Games in Kuala Lumpur. For the first time, cricket has been included on the itinerary, but the English are demanding an appearance fee.
Imagine Her Majesty the Queen coming in here and Prince Edward being the president of the CG. I've not seen no English cricket teams. My God, I don't think they would be pleased.
Even if England sticks to its guns, there'll be no money handed over, just an invitation to another country. Clinton Fletcher for Nightline.
A surprise at today's AFL draft, with former Crows skipper Tony McGuinness being bypassed. McGuinness says he may take legal action, claiming an agreement with the Swans suddenly evaporated.
This was not only the toughest day in Tony McGuinness's 17 years of league football, it also seemed certain to be his last. When Sydney officials arrived at league headquarters for this morning's draft, the deal with the 32-year-old had already been called off. McGuinness says he'd signed an agreement with the Swans last Wednesday, and as a result had fended off several Melbourne-based clubs who'd shown interest in him. But then the AFL intervened.
The Swans weren't in a position to draft me because the AFL had placed the salary cap restrictions on them.
Of those that were drafted today, Melbourne used its first pick to snare Albury's Lee Newton. In something of a swap, Collingwood chose ex-Hawk Jason Taylor, while Hawthorn took on ex-Magpie John Hassel. Another former Collingwood player, Stephen Pitt, is heading to the Bulldogs. Like Sydney, reigning premiers North Melbourne were also in danger of breaching the salary cap and will have to make do with a list of 41 this season instead of the usual 42. Tony Jones for Nightline.
After the hiding they took in the oceans south of Australia, everyone that survives the French-run solo round-the-world yacht race will feel like a winner. But for the record books, someone has to be hailed the winner, and it's Christophe Ogween who was first across the line.
37-year-old Ogween completed the 18,000 nautical mile journey in the record time of 105 days, 20 hours and 31 minutes. The former teacher says he will never do it again. The rescues off Australia changing the way he looked at the race. From the air is the safest place to watch the French Enduro, as 800 bikes charge down the beach before the first chaotic bottleneck. For the next 3 hours, it's a miracle to stay upright in the classic of the sands. The final moments were just as frantic, the winner barely able to get across the line because of the crowd. Further inland, extreme skiing in the French Alps. The European Championships attracted 69 competitors willing to tease fate. Very few made it down the cliff face unmarked. Simply being able to ski another day is a major achievement. Ken Sutcliffe for Nightline.
In finance news, the Australian share market closed at a new high today, driven by more interest in those banks. The All Ords finished 8 points up. In Tokyo, the Nikkei fell almost 280 points. In London tonight, the FT 100 is 8 points up in morning trading. Gold is fetching 346.15 US an ounce. And in European trading tonight, the Australian dollar is buying 76.55 US cents, 1.3 Deutschmarks, 95 yen and 47p. The national weather, and there's a trough of low pressure off the east coast. Tropical cyclone Harold is in the Coral Sea and moving south, while a front is moving into the Bight. The forecasts, showers for Brisbane and Darwin, fine in Sydney, Canberra, Melbourne and Hobart. Another hot day ahead for Adelaide, and in Perth, a fine day there as well. That's the news this Tuesday night. To finish, 3 little rays of sunshine have arrived in Sydney. A trio of Cambodian sun bears with a new lease on life. An Australian living in Phnom Penh found the bears in cages outside a restaurant and, fearing they would soon be on the menu, arranged for them to be shipped to Taronga Zoo. After 30 days in quarantine, the bears will move into an environmentally suitable enclosure. Good night.